Hi everyone, and welcome to the second part of the mermaid face. So this will be the last of the sculpting of the face. So I'm just continuing as I did before, adding more clay, because this is what I usually do, is never satisfied and then add some more clay. But it's part of the process. You sort of see where you maybe need a little bit more, and so I'm adding a bit more to the bridge of the nose and on the cheeks, because I wanted her to have sort of big cheeks and look a bit cute but cross. So I'm blending in the clay, which is always a real pain. Then around her lips, I wanted that bottom lip to really be pushed out. So I'm working on making the shadows on the side and under the lip quite deep. And then of course it's time to add ears, which are you would think would be simple, but are not. Probably because they're so small as well. But so I'm adding, so with her ears, I wanted them to sort of stick out quite a lot. So again, trying to get that cute, cross but cute sort of look. So I wanted ears that stuck out quite a lot. So what I'm starting off doing is using the basic shape, size of the ear. So I've got two pieces of clay that are the same size and are shaped the same, so that you've got them pretty much the same from the beginning before you even add it to the head. I add them on, then I'm, without doing any of the details, I'm getting how they look from the front. So make sure that they are the shape and angle that you want, because everyone's ears are different. So these would be very sticky out ears. So I'm getting them into the right shape and how I want them to look, and then adding an extra piece at the back of the ear just to sort of solidify the shape. And then I'm moving on to other areas. Like once the ears are on, you can then you can get the shape of the cheekbones better, because now you've got you've got points to use as a landmark. That's the word I want, a landmark. So the ears will help you help tell you how the cheekbones should look, and where they should be, and all the shadows and things. So that's what's quite helpful. And while I'm doing that, the ears are sitting there and getting a bit more solid, because if you leave polymer clay for a while, once you've sort of squashed it, before you add it to the body or the face or wherever you're adding it to, it's warm because it's been in your fingers, so it's a bit stickier. It's a bit more sticky. So leaving it for a while, like 5-10 minutes at the most, just lets it cool down a bit and it gets a bit more set, and then it's easier to work on again. So with ears, they're small, and so the clay might be a bit squishy and move quite a lot. So just leaving them as they are in like a basic shape of ear for a while and go and move on to somewhere else. So I decided to go on to the eyes. These tools are great ones. I've had this wooden tool all my sculpting life, so nearly 20 years, and it's great for, it's almost like you can draw with it in a way, but then it also makes great like crevices and things, so they're just very useful. That's the tiniest ball tool that I have. If you'd like to see the whole series right now, right the way through the making of this mermaid, you can go to my Patreon, and under collections, all you have to do is follow me. You don't have to be a member. Go into the collections area, find the Salty Mermaid, and you can watch them all for free. And they are filmed in more of a real time, so it's not speeded up there. So if you don't want to wait till the next part comes out on YouTube, then just give me a follow on Patreon and you can see them all for free. And now I need to bring the brows down because she needs to look really not happy. So it's just fiddling with the clay until you get the expression you want. So when I'm doing the from the nose to the bottom lip. I'm sort of bringing the clay down, as like your skin would be if you sort of pursed your lips, your skin would move down. So I'm kind of trying to imitate those same movements when I'm pulling the clay. I don't know if it helps, but it's how I do it. So now that the ears have sat for a while and they've got a bit cooler and they're a bit more solid, I'm going back to them and just shaping the intricate details of an ear, which is quite different. It's quite detailed. I always get the outside rim first, take a piece out in the middle because you've got that kind of hollow in the middle of your ear, and that helps to create some landmarks to be able to build the rest of it. And I definitely always have reference. So on my computer I've got large pictures of ears so I can copy, and from both sides obviously flipped. I often flip images so that I can get the same on the other side. I can see it because my brain can't flip things in my head. I have to see it. So another good tool for using on very kind of sensitive areas where it's a very small thing, and any tiny little change in the clay will make a big change to the look of the face. I use brushes because brushes they're a soft tool. They're really good for smoothing, but they're also really good for changing something slightly without really changing it, if that makes sense, because it's a soft touch. So I'm still working on getting that angry look on her face. So one thing to do whenever you're doing something like that is look from the front, but then also look from the side, because whatever you do on the front is going to affect your profile. So constantly looking at the both. Then I'm looking at the mouth, making sure that it's pulled down and that the bottom lip is really pushed out, because that's quite important to this particular piece. It gives the whole feeling of what we want for the whole thing. So I want her to look very sulky. And I'm just making those shadows quite pronounced because she'll be pushing her lip out. And my pointy tool is extremely useful. As I say, I get them with cheap nail art brushes. There's always a pointy tool in there, and I've got about 10 of them. But it gives you a point that is smaller than my smallest ball tool, so it's very useful to use almost like a pen, almost like a drawing. When I'm finally happy, which takes a very long time, but when I'm finally happy with the face, or I think I am, I do smooth. And with the face, I don't use my roughest brush, but I do need to use a brush at first that is quite short, bristled, quite firm, because I have to get rid of all of that drawing lines that I've done when I've been sculpting. And then once I've gone over the whole face with that brush, so it's kind of smoother but not really smooth, I then use a brush with slightly longer bristles, because then you're going to get a little bit of a softer touch and it's going to smooth even more. It is always quite fiddly with a face, because especially when the face is so small, any little change is massive to how it looks. So you see, I'm using it as sort of a tool as well. Even in smoothing, I'm thinking about how the skin has moved, like it moved over the bones, and so I'm kind of thinking about that at the same time. So you've got to be soft but also firm, because some areas you might use the brush as a soft tool just to bring out shadows even more. And ears are always really difficult to smooth out. Just remember, after the base is baked, you can always use either a sanding paper or acetone to smooth even more. I always find acetone leaves the clay with a bit more of a matte surface, whereas sanding like a soft sanding paper, like a sanding paper that's got sponge in between, is quite good for sanding faces, but it will give you much more of a smoother is that the right word, satiny finish, which I find with adding paint is not the best. I don't love that for adding paint on top of, but it is actually another way. And then again, I'm using the little brush around the eyes to add more of a shadow under the eyes. And because it's a brush, it's a softer effect. So it's pressing to make a shadow, to dent the skin there, but it's softer than a tool would be if you were doing the same thing. And then just making sure the eyes are the same shape, same size, all those kind of things. I also wanted to be looking up, so I've sort of moved the eyes up a bit. Then the very last thing that I will do is, once I've let the clay sit for a while, so again, it needs to be like, once you've smoothed it, just leave it for 5-10 minutes, and then I've got this tiny pin. It's actually a bead needle that is embedded in some old clay, and it gives you a very soft line, a very thin line. So I use a combination of very, very thin needle and then a normal kind of pin or needle. So I've got the two, and I'm just working with the two of them just to bring out the eyelid. So I'm not worried about any of that before, because you just don't need to. For some you do, but for this particular one, she's scowling, her brows are sort of brought together. Her eyelid's not going to be, there's not going to be a big gap between her brow and her eyelid, because it's all kind of being squished down. So I didn't worry about any of that, bringing out her eyelid until the end. So I could just focus on sculpting the rest of it without having to worry about the fiddly bits. So this is my very skinny bead needle, very, very thin. It gives you a very, very fine line. It's not going to mess too much with the clay and change what you've sculpted, because if you press down with a very thick needle, you're going to change everything that the shape and everything that you've just sculpted. And then I also use it underneath for little creases underneath your eyes. So that bead needle is really good for very subtle things like the little lines in the lips. Now the very last thing I'm doing is taking my pointy tool again and making a groove in the middle of the head. That is so that I can add hair afterwards. So it's going to make it much easier for me when it comes to later on adding hair and getting a nice clean hairline. So you don't have to try and bend the hair over itself to get that hairline. I mean, that does work and it's very useful, but I just find this is so much easier just to do that and do it before it's baked. You can do it afterwards, but it's much more scary. Anyway, the last thing I want to do before I go is just show you my Patreon page for this month. I've got a new video on, and it is part 4 of the Girl with Dragonfly Tattoo, and it's all about adding clay to the torso and also sculpting the foot on the leg, which I'm really excited about because I've filmed so much of it. Hope you've enjoyed this, and thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.